What's up, YouTube, and welcome to Gods Unchained Market Watch, where we look over all the notable market movements for Gods Unchained for the week. Hi, my name is Juju. I'll be your host, and what's up, y'all? It's been a while, right? Yeah, about 4 months. So the reason why I've been absent was because, if you can tell, I bought a house. I'm in it now. I'm fully settled in. The move took a while because of renovations and stuff. Also, uh, in the meantime, I was doing a lot of dance gigs. For those of you who don't know, I'm a professional dancer by trade. So, yeah, the last gig that I did was Lollapalooza, where I danced backup for one of the biggest K-pop artists in the world right now, J-Hope, member of BTS. He had his first solo debut performance. Maybe I'll link a video to the performance in the description below, but for the most part, that's pretty much what I've been doing. And I apologize for the break. Life kind of happened, but I'm back now and I'm ready to make more content. So yeah, with that being out of the way, a couple of new things have happened since Gods Unchained, or since I took the break, right? So Shine is a thing. Daily rewards have been a thing. Weekend rank changed from 25 games to 18 games, so that's doable, more manageable now. And we have a new mini set coming out. I think it's called Light's Judgment, right? Or something like that. It's a new mini expansion based off of Mortal Judgment. A lot of lore stuff happened. Basically, Therial is not a god anymore. Lysander becomes, I guess he becomes a god. And they're doing this thing called the Cosmic Shift, where basically all cards associated with Therial's corruption of mortals and Gods Unchained is going to be bought out by Gods Unchained itself through like an independent wallet, something like that. So basically, if you are interested in getting extra tokens and you want to sell off your useless like Therial cards, feel free to do that. I don't think it's all Therial cards good though. I think it's going to be a specific number related to the new set, most likely Chaining of the Gods and some other stuff. But anyways, it feels good to be back. Let's go ahead and get started with our cards. First up, for the death cards, we have Return to the Cave. This is your 1 mana spell. Add 2 mana locks, heal your god for 10. Currently, we see it at $11.85. A couple days ago, it was at $6.18. I actually like this card. This is probably one of the more potent burst heal spells you'll have in the game, if not the most potent burst heal spell in the game. Of course, it comes with a hefty cost. You're giving yourself 2 mana locks, which means you're putting yourself 2 turns behind the opponent, but maybe sometime during late game, the utility gets better, right? You definitely don't want to play this within the first 5 turns because you going to from 5 mana to 3 mana is bad. But hey, if you're on turn, like if you're at 7 mana and you can afford to play like this card, I feel like it's a good option, especially if you need to heal and stay alive. So this can definitely see play in control or late game death decks. Also, it's an epic in a later set, so this card is pretty hard to come across. Moving on to the next card, we have Takat the Forgotten. This is your 7 mana 2/5 backline. At the start of your turn and roar, summon the strongest creature from your void to the board. Give it Solace, and if it's an Anubian, also give it Blitz and Leech. I actually think this card has potential in a certain deck. I've seen back when Weekend Rank had 25. You used to play 25 games for Weekend Ranked. I've seen a deck that utilized this card go 23-2. So that's pretty good. And the premise of the deck is essentially you use all of the ramp cards available in the death class. So Fanatic of Kanoom, and I think it's the Snake something. It's the 2 mana 2/1 that is either give poisonous or ramp. You use those cards to ramp up your mana, and I think you can use Ataraxia too. I'm not too sure. And then during the early game, you also use cards that discard a card from the top pile of your deck. So the 2 mana 1/1 Ghastly Ghoul or something like that, and then the 2 mana 4/3 is one with the Afterlife, where you discard a card from the top of your deck. Those cards, if you build the deck around it right, or if you build the deck right, you can potentially hit maybe a 7, 8, even sometimes 5 mana card from the top of your deck. And then from there, you use the ramp cards to gain access to your Takat, your Blessed Ibis, and then your 5 mana Resurrection spell. So there's a lot of potential with this card. I think if you like playing big minions, you can definitely check this deck out. But for the most part, we do see an increase in price from $2 all the way to $3.54, $3.44. Cheapest you can find it right now is $3.43. Cool. Onto our deception cards. We have Hypnos Puzzle Box. This is your 1 mana spell. Target a creature goes to sleep. Add 2 random runes, anims, or enchanted weapons to each god's hand. This is more commonly seen in deception control decks. Sleep deception is definitely going to be a thing. Also, in decks that aim to not play a lot of cards, this card is really good in control versus control matchups, where each opponent is not playing any cards. You can play this card on one of your turns, and if your opponent has like 8 cards, 7 cards, you're basically forcing them to burn a card, and that could be really good. As far as the cards that you give your opponent, the runes, anims, or enchanted weapons, they're not going to be overpowered. They're pretty much like mid-level cards, if anything. So you're not losing the game off giving your opponents cards with this. So it could be pretty good. Honestly, I think it has some uses, and it is a lot weaker against aggro decks though. So make sure, I guess it's like a conditional thing. It's basically a metagame call, right? So if you're finding yourself in a metagame with a lot of control decks and you're playing a control deck yourself, you want to play Hypnos Puzzle Box. Next up, we have Chaining of the Gods. This is your 4 mana spell. Pick 2. The strongest creature gains -3, -2. The weakest creature gains +2/+3. Each creature gains +1/+1. So this card is most likely going to be one of the cards where the Cosmic Shift will buy out. So if you have any of these cards and you want some extra God tokens, I suggest listing them for God tokens and letting the Cosmic Shift buy it out. As far as what I think about the card, I think it's actually pretty good in terms of value. Especially in a deck where you're running like a lot of small creatures, maybe it's a light zoo kind of build. I think 4 mana for this card is kind of slow, but at the same time, you could also make it work. It serves as mainly a finisher, but also can be a form of pseudo removal. Moving on, we have Theriel's Anvil. So this card saw a spike in price. It's went from $1.27 all the way to $3.98. The cheapest price you can buy it at is $3.52 right now. It's a 9 mana creature, 4/6. Backline ward, can attack at the end of each turn. Summon a 4/7 Divine Chains. Honestly, if you can get this card on the field, it's pretty good. Right, because it has backline, because it has ward, it's going to be pretty hard to deal with. However, it is 9 mana, and you're going to have to wait at least 15 turns to play it. And if you can get there reliably, great. But in my experience, it's really hard to get there. Also, if you draw this at the beginning of the game, it's just going to be sitting there for 15 turns, and that's just one less card you can use against your opponent. So can be good in certain situations. You can summon this off of any of the cards that summon like random 9 mana creatures. I think that's like broken if you can do that reliably, but as far as including in your deck and playing it, it does come with its risks, right? Other than that though, if you get it out, hey, good for you. It's a really good card. Next up, we have Cadmus, Son of Lysander. This is your 4 mana 2/4 Olympian. Frontline armor. After this creature is attacked, give 1 armor to the chosen one. Roar, a random 6 mana creature in your deck becomes the chosen one. So I like this card for a couple of reasons. 4 mana 2/4 is not a strong stat line by any means. The armor does help alleviate it a little bit. Frontline is nice. This is probably a must include in your Chosen One decks. And Chosen One is getting some new support in the new expansion, so that's nice. Being able to have some autonomy in choosing like who your Chosen One is could be pretty great. Like you can make it a Lysander, you can make it an Asterius, you can make it any other 6 mana creature that you want to include. There might be something busted with any of the neutral 6 mana minions or any of the other existing light 6 mana minions. So definitely check this card out. This card is going to be warranting some experimentation in Chosen One decks. So it's a pretty solid card. In terms of splashing it in a general light deck, it could work. Honestly, if you splash any Chosen One tech and you add Cadmus, it just feels good to have a Chosen One package. Yeah, I could definitely see it working. We do see it peak at $7.32 or $7.32. The cheapest you can find it right now is $6.68. Okay, so next up we have Fated Arrival. Draw the Chosen One from your deck, give it ward and frontline. This is a must include in all Chosen One decks, in my opinion. Being able to fish it out is really good. So for this card though, unless you're playing a slower Chosen One deck that aims to stall out the game, I definitely wouldn't try to play this on turn 3. Especially in a metagame where aggro decks are prevalent. So if I'm playing against an aggro deck, I'd probably wait until I have like 5 or 6 mana to play this card so that I'm not forsaking a turn my third turn just to play this. But in control matchups, you can totally play this card on turn 3 because most of those decks aren't going to try to kill you fast. So that's pretty good. Yeah, and you get to give it ward in frontline, so that's always a nice thing to do for Chosen One decks. Although I do think there's a lot of support that in the Chosen One archetype that gives ward in frontline. But honestly, it's probably going to be a must include. It peaks all the way to $1.65. The cheapest you can find it right now is $1.33. Cool. So next up, we have Triumvirate Prophet. This is your 2 mana 2/2 Mystic. Roar, give the Chosen One Afterlife. Give this creature strength and health to the new Chosen One. This is also a pretty potent effect for Chosen One cards. The cheapest you can find this right now is $1.53. What do I think of it? It's probably a must include, honestly. I think the effect is really good, especially if you draw the Chosen One early and you need to play it. 2 mana 2/2 is a pretty underwhelming stat line for a 2 mana creature, but you're not really playing it for the stats, you're playing it for the effect. It is a mystic, so it has some synergy with Frumentary Researcher, and Frumentary Researcher is a card that's very splashable within the light domain as a whole because there are a lot of mystics in there that are really good. So I'd expect to see this card see play in Chosen One decks. Yeah, and the price is pretty cheap. It's $1.53 right now. Cool. So next up we have Magic. Our only Magic card for this Market Watch is going to be Corralis Runemoth. This is your 3 mana 0/3 wild creature. Backline at the end of your turn, add a random rune to your hand and reduce its cost to 0. You're almost getting full value from this card just by playing it. You get to summon it, end your turn, get a free rune that costs 0, and hey, if your Magic deck synergizes or has creatures that synergize with you playing spells, like, I don't know, Dralamar, Archimea, Ruined Familiar, those kind of cards, this card is a must include. It offers so much tempo, and yeah, if your opponent chooses to ignore it because it has 0 attack and it's not really a threat on the battlefield, you're just going to keep getting advantage for it. So it's a great card. I think it's a must include. Cheapest you can find it right now is $4.36. Next up for our wild cards, we have Vicious Manicore. This is our 5 mana 4/3 wild. Blitz overkill at the end of your turn. If you are frenzied, deal 3 damage to your opponent's god. So this card saw a little bit of an increase in activity. The wild class as a whole hasn't really seen a lot of activity, so I was just going to pick this card out. It did increase, but only by a slight amount. The reason why I wanted to highlight it is I actually think this card is pretty decent when used in conjunction with Ominous Burrow, the 3 mana 1/4, where at the start of your turn, if that card is on the field, you get to destroy that card and summon a 5 mana wild creature from your deck. When used in conjunction with Ominous Burrow, this card creates a massive swing in tempo. So you get to summon this 5 mana 4/3. It has Blitz. It has Overkill. So you basically ram it into something. And if it kills it, the access damage goes to another creature or your opponent. And if it goes to your opponent, you proc its Frenzy effect. So you do an additional 3 damage. All the while, you still have 4 mana to play this card. Or to play other cards. So that's pretty potent, in my opinion. I like this card. I think it does deserve to see an increase in activity, but I mean it is falling off. So, if you're playing a wild deck for this weekend, I definitely suggest you try this when you in conjunction with Ominous Burrow. See how that works. Cool. So moving on to the war cards, we have Anagreos, Daemon Prince, 9 mana, 12/7. God Blitz. After this creature destroys another creature, obliterate it instead. Roar, deals 6 damage to each enemy creature. So this is a pretty potent finisher for control god classes. Or I could even see it play in like mid-range. The only thing is it's 9 mana, so you have to wait 15 to 16 turns to play this card. If you draw it in the beginning of the game, it's basically dead until you get to 9 mana, and that could be really bad depending on the matchup. However, it's a pretty good finisher. Get to 9 mana. By this point in the game, you and your opponent should be at pretty low on health, unless it's like a super control versus control matchup. And the fact that it obliterates creatures instead of destroying it, and it has like a board wipe effect built into it, means that it can get behind any like pesky afterlife effects that might stop it from attacking your opponent directly. I like the card. We see it spike from $1.05 to $2.33. So that's a significant jump. If you're running a control war deck and you need to, I don't know, you want to splash in a finisher, this is something to consider. Next up, we have Grand Hall. This is your 4 mana 2/5 structure. Frontline can't attack. Roar, give 1 strength and leech to each other friendly creature. This card is actually a pretty decent card, especially in tempo war decks. Serves as a form of burst heal if you have a field full of war creatures, which is nice, or not even war creatures, just creatures in general. Also buffs your creatures, so can serve as a weaker finisher if you need it. Also, it has frontline, and it doesn't give itself leech, but if it did, that would be nice. But the fact that it has frontline means that it protects your other creatures too. So I would play this card in like a deck, maybe an aggro or a mid-range war deck that aims to win via like having a field full of creatures. Cool. So next up we have our neutral cards. First is Blessed Ibis. This is our 7 mana 4/5. At the end of each turn, pull a random creature from each God's Void onto the board. So remember that deck that we talked about with Takat? This card falls in line with that kind of effect. I would definitely run this card in that deck for sure, because it's not just at the end of your turn, it's at the end of your opponent's turn as well. So if your opponent doesn't deal with it, you can amass like a really full board really fast. Yeah. And 4/5, it's like decent. It's pretty understated for a 7 mana creature, but I mean, depending on the creature you pull at the end of your turn, you can easily get value from it, right? Like, imagine if this thing pulls a Polyhymnia. That's pretty much a high roll, but even if it pulls like your Fanatic of Canoom, which is a 2 mana 2/3, that's 7. No, it's a 3/2. Sorry, 2 mana 3/2. So that's like what, 7/7 for a 7 mana creature. Decent, right? But definitely, I would include this in a deck where I'm aiming to dump a bunch of high mana creatures into my grave and then focus on resummoning them. And for our final card, we have Deathwish Thanatar. This is our 16 mana 4/4 Nether. This creature costs 1 less for each damage your god has taken. I personally like this card. It has a lot going for it in terms of like playability. It's really easy to take 14 damage and play this card for free, or 16 damage and play this card for free. That's nice. It has the Nether tag, so it has some Nether synergies. That's also nice. 0 mana 4/4 is pretty good. I would like to get that as soon as possible, and you can probably run that in a class like Death where it does damage to itself, right? For investment purposes, this card is a Genesis set neutral that's an epic, and those are pretty rare in my opinion. And it has a decent effect, so it can see play. Is the fact that it's a neutral card and you can splash it into any deck makes it super versatile, right? And I mean, Demogorgon is the same way, but obviously Demogorgon is like way more overpowered. But this is something to consider. But yeah, so the cheapest you could find this card right now is $42.22. It peaked all the way to $62.82. That's wild. And there you have it, y'all. That was our first Market Watch back. Thank y'all for tuning in. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel for more Market Watch updates. I am going to release a video covering the new expansion for Mortal Judgment. So we'll go ahead and do that. From what I see from that set, some cards could be metagame changing for sure, but I'll leave it up to that video. Anyways, thank y'all for tuning in. Really appreciate it. Much love. Make sure to drink your water and tell your loved ones you love them. Peace.